Hey guys, some gamer dude here. So today we're going to look at the worst TCG I have ever played. I'm sure there's worse out there, probably some obscure licensed dreck made for a quick buck, but this is the worst one I've personally played. It's fine in concept and has a bit of a pedigree behind it, but some of the gameplay choices and artistic choices make this game incredibly hard to pick up, and honestly, more than a bit cringy for a few reasons. So the game I'm talking about is more than a bit obscure. I think it's officially dead now, finally, or at least seems to be, and is nothing more than a Magic the Gathering clone. No, it's not Force of Will. That's not dead, and Force of Will is much better thought out as a game. Though, one thing they have in common is interesting, and I have wondered if Force of Will took gameplay elements from this game, just doing it a great magnitude of times better. The game I'm talking about is The Spoils, originally published and created by Tenacious Games, then Arcane Tinsman, who own Dragon Shield, The Sleeves. The Spoils is literally Magic the Gathering with some rules changes and a warped colour pie. In some respects, it's even closer to Magic than Force of Will. But some of what it changes is so detrimental, it makes the game a bother to play. It comes from Josh Little of Imagination Duel and a former Magic the Gathering pro player, John Finkel. Lots of people seem to like Imagination, but it died within 4 sets, just over a year, and has some rather interesting stories regarding Score, the old publishers of the Dragon Ball Z card game. So let's get back to the spoils and give a brief overview of the game, starting with the biggest change, the faction card. Factions are a unique card, nothing is really comparable to it across any game I can think of. It lists a lot of aspects of play, too many, ranging from starting life, here called influence, to basic gameplay actions that could be in the rulebook, like restoring your resources at the beginning of your turn. Very few factions actually play with the things listed, and most just read the exact same except what resources you start with and your unique action to that faction card. The entire card could have been compressed into just starting life, starting resources, and the unique action. But it does include some very unique gameplay aspects I've yet to see in another TCG. The Spoils has a system wherein you may draw a card or play a resource each turn for free, but not both. I should note that here any card can be played face down as a colourless resource, so you don't strictly need a resource card. Resource cards in particular take a massive downtick in importance because of not only this and how faction cards search your deck at the beginning of the game, but how cards are costed. If you're familiar with Kaijudo, this is very similar. A card lists its total cost at the top left of the card, then lists specific resources you must control to cast it. This is known as the threshold. As cards get higher in cost or strength, typically for every odd tick upwards, 1, 3, 5, you need an extra threshold met, though some have higher thresholds than their costs. The decks in the Spoils are 75 cards, and generally people only ran about 18 resource cards. That's a really low amount for any game with a dedicated resource card in the deck without mass searching abilities like Pokemon. But the faction card has another aspect to it. As many times as you like, for most every faction card, you may pay 3 to draw a card or 4 to play a resource. So if you need more gas or want to ramp up quicker, there you go. I don't think this aspect of the resource card is bad at all. That's all you really need to know about the faction cards. I mentioned Force of Will earlier, how it might have some influence from this game. This would be how the turns progress. Both games follow the free-form turn structure. You don't have rigid phases. You just do what you want until there is nothing you can or want to do anymore. While this is becoming more common now, it was very rare when Force of Will was released 6+ years ago, let alone The Spoils 12 years ago. So I said it's a Magic clone. Let's go through the card types. The Spoils doesn't really have an analog to sorceries. Tactics, this game's spell card, all work at instant speed. It's a choice and it's fine. Next up we have locations/structures, which are an interesting nod to enchantments that bear a striking resemblance to Planeswalkers in that they have their own life. Planeswalkers would be released in Magic a year later. There are also item cards, which work exactly as you'd think. They're enchantment auras or equipment from Magic. Then we finally get to the character cards. Characters work mostly like creatures in Magic. Attack is power, life is toughness, except they also have a third stat, speed. Faster characters attack first. So basically, everyone is on their own version of First Strike. Yes, in the basic rules of the game, the Spoils has the keyword of the hoax card Throat Wolf. first to strike. This, along with the game having group attacking in addition to group blocking and the freeform turn, changes a ton from Magic. So where's my problem? What makes this game the worst I've ever played? Because it doesn't sound so bad on paper. It's a snowball effect going backwards from combat. Faster characters dominate combat unless you have the cards, either bulky characters or removal, to stop them. You might not be able to summon something bulky enough, have something bulky enough, or be able to cast removal. So you start flooding your hand into resources to mass draw. All the time you're getting killed by fast characters and your opponent is summoning more fast characters. On top of that, you might not have the threshold for something bulky enough and not draw the right resources. This is not a fun experience and does not give a good first impression. My friend and I were both coerced into trying this game by the same person separately, spending money on the game before playing it too. And we both came to the same conclusion separately. The game isn't fun. The speed mechanic and the draw or play resource are things I blame. Think about it in Magic terms. Your opponent is playing a first strike deck. You need to wait until you draw something bulky enough or just chump block a lot. But then you draw forests for your blue too, having only one island out, but you can only play draw cards and ramp. It's a fucking miserable experience. My friend bought a mono deck, so he didn't have the threshold issues, and doesn't remember how things went down exactly. But he also had an utterly miserable experience. He found the game repellent. The game is an in-joke between us now, and has been for years. For a game to do well, you need to both satisfy the casual and the competitive player. The game needs to be pick up and play ready, having the feeling that a newbie can win and give them some satisfaction, but also have enough depth for the competitive player to feel the game is skill-based. The spoils skew so far into the latter, it didn't have a decently sized audience and could do nothing but leech players of other games, aiming at the competitive Magic players that want to leave Magic. This isn't really a market, it's a very tiny niche. The game just isn't satisfying on first encounter, or until, I assume, you inject enough money into it. This is not a place you want to be. You need the game to have good initial impressions to get people emotionally invested. Getting people hopeless, frustrated, or bored is the wrong direction and tells me the introduction, and probably the game itself, needs more work. The Spoils had 6 years of development, and I can tell you straight up how to fix it in 5 minutes about thinking it. Basically be Force of Will, because Force of Will, for all my issues with it, is the Spoils done right. Force of Will has the fluid turn structure, but keeps combat simple. It keeps sorceries for balance reasons. The ruler is a simplified version of the faction. The Magic Stone deck is far simpler and vastly more elegant in application than how the spoils handle resources. Not just that, it's better. It actually works for a start. For its credit, Force of Will really doesn't have mechanical issues like the spoils. All its issues are balance, things that Jeff has been sorting out. But there is another thing we need to talk about with the spoils, the art. While I am not easily triggered or offended, I'm very far from the PC police, I cringe like everyone else. Caster Chronicles? Cringe. It's sexualized little girls. It's creepy. Some of Force of Will's art, even my beloved Valentina, cringe. Proportions are painful to look at, and Overlord Valentina, just Overlord Valentina. It's inappropriate for public play. The Spoils? That's some cringe. The Spoils has a huge amount of flavour, having literal fat cat bankers with their hired goons, Lovecraftian horror occultists, bloodthirsty warlords, pretty much a circus of rogues, and late-speaking elven gearsmiths as their colours. In spite of trying to appeal to adult sensibilities mechanically and trying to be too complex for complexity's sake, the art appeals to teenagers only. Millennial teenagers. It's too dark for kids, it's too dated for today's teens, and it's too cringy for adults. It's that one niche it hits and only hits. For its credit, it's diverse, appealing to edgelords, people invested in early to mid 2000s internet culture and social commentary, but it's not timeless like Magic, Duel Masters, or Force of Will, and it's immature for the audience it's aiming at. With all that said, the resource cards are the worst of the lot. The resource cards, in particular the basic resource cards, here known as staples, all depict attractive, scantily clad women. In context, you attach the woman to your faction to produce the resource to cast whatever you're casting. You attach the woman to your faction. Again, I don't mean to be the PC police, but this never sat right and never sat right with anyone I've asked. There is something uncomfortable about it, and many people have said this. Not that Force of Will hasn't had attractive women on their magic stones, but they're not the point. The stone itself is the point. It's the focal point. The stone is the resource, not the woman. Context matters quite a bit here. Plus, Force of Will uses Japanese artists. Anime style can get away with a lot more than Western. With the spoils, the woman herself and her emotions are the resource. It's really easy to see why the spoils never went anywhere. Even after 10 years and only 13 or so sets, including multiple core sets, the game was not wildly appealing from either a gameplay or flavor aspect. The game was also criminally mismanaged, 2 publishers, and only 13 sets over a decade. No real marketing to speak of other than word of mouth and a few inserts in Dragon Shield packaging. Even the back of the spoils cards were bland and uninspiring, looking like a playing card rather than a trading card. The spoils marketed itself via fans as a better Magic. No, just no. It tried to deal with Magic's issues and spice things up, it gets credit for that, but it was just an altered Magic. It's not better, and in my opinion, it's worse. It fucked up too many things, and I can't comprehend why it came out in the condition it did after half a decade of development. Even after my friend and I picked up Force of Will, then Magic, the spoils was still the butt of jokes. That's all it's remembered as. That thing we both hated and were coerced into by an at the time mutual friend to spend money on. It is by far the worst trading card game either of us have ever played. This has been Some Gamer Dude, and thanks for watching.